Hello to all the members and students of the Association of MBAs, and welcome to the second in our series of webinars. Today's subject, how the digital technology revolution is changing business, is something that's close to all our hearts. If it isn't, we should be worrying. We're delighted to welcome Michael de Kare-Silver, author of eShop 2020, How the Digital Technology Revolution is Changing Business, to this series. In today's presentation, he will offer his analysis of the developments in digital technology over the past decade and how they have changed businesses and our working lives and what we should expect looking forward. Michael, we're delighted to welcome you here today. To all of our members and students throughout the world, including Hello New Zealand, Australia, Africa, Ireland, France, and others, what we'd like to do is make this as interactive as possible, so please send your questions in. Michael's very happy to have questions throughout the presentation and also your comments. For those of you that were on our last webinar, there was a little bit of a technical hitch with the sound in the early stages of the webinar, so if there are any comments again, we want this to be as valuable to you as possible, so please let us know. Without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Michael de Kare-Silver, our author, eShop 2020, to start the presentation. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to have this chance to talk to you. And the topic of the conversation today is the digital technology revolution. And it's my firm belief that we are witnessing a genuine revolution as profound as the Industrial Revolution was hundreds of years ago. And this is something that we are, in a way, privileged to be living through. We are seeing the incremental steps day by day and perhaps not appreciating how far-reaching and fundamental these changes are. I think if we look back, if we were in 2050 and we look back on this period of time, we would have a greater perspective of just how fundamental these changes are taking place. I work not only as a writer but as a consultant advising a number of global multinational companies, and I'm sure you know from your own studies, these organizations are absolutely challenged with how do we migrate, how do we move forward from in a way, an old-fashioned mainframe legacy technology environment into a world that's web-based, mobile-based, and cloud-based, and how do we put ourselves at the front and leading edge of all of that. So we can perhaps come back to the nature of the revolution a little bit later on in this discussion. In the meantime, there's four things in particular that I wanted to go through today. These are as listed on the screen there: the dominance of a few, the retail time bomb, the move to touch, talk, and think. And I'm taking UK as a case study and looking at UK as a global leader. And I'm very mindful this obviously is an international audience, so I'd welcome not just questions but also genuine perspectives from your own countries as to how you see some of these changes panning out and how you see things developing. So anecdote, examples, case study, all very, very helpful, as well as your questions, please. So let's just start off with the dominance of the few. And here's a chart which you may have seen before. Big tech company assets in billions of dollars from Google Finance, looking at total cash and total assets amongst the top leading technology global companies. The extraordinary thing is that the top 12 technology companies in the US have a staggering $215 billion of cash searching for investment opportunities. These companies are already, as we know, amongst the most valued on the planet, and they are going to have an extraordinary impact on our lives if they're not already doing so. Just take, for example, Google. Google as an organization we're all very familiar with, and let's just remind ourselves of some of the things and assets that Google own and some of the place they have in our lives. So of course they own YouTube. They've developed organically Google Maps and Google Earth, the Google Chrome web browser and operating system, Android, Motorola. So here we are, just casually, if you like, spending $12.5 billion last year acquiring Motorola as an organization. Google TV, another major initiative, which I'm sure we will see more of as internet-connected television becomes more and more prevalent in our homes. DoubleClick, AdMob, Gmail, Picasa. What about ITA software? Some of you may know that that is the global leading software solution for travel agents, travel booking, and airlines across the whole world. And most every airline and travel company subscribes to that. Then we've got the Google eBook Store, if we want to go that far, the Google eBook Reader, the Google Wallet to govern and manage simple transactions online. And I may have missed something out, in which case, again, please type in your, this is something that you can add to the conversation. But it's just phenomenal how pervasive and widespread is this Google reach, how it dominates our lives, how we move from one piece of Google to another without even thinking about it. In similar fashion, Microsoft last year spent a tiny portion of its cash reserves, $8.5 billion, acquiring Skype. Skype at the time, as you may well know, it was at best break-even, certainly not making a profit, but what it did do is give Microsoft access to 663 million global users worldwide. Microsoft also actually has a small shareholding in Facebook, 1.6% shareholding, and while that maybe doesn't give it much leverage over the way Facebook develops, it enables it to develop some strategic conversations and strategic partnerships. Indeed, Microsoft also keeps quiet the fact that it has a small shareholding in Apple. Microsoft has also announced a major global strategic alliance with Nokia, which many expect will lead to its eventual takeover of that company as well. And if you look down the register, Microsoft has acquired some 150 other companies over the past 5 years, or hold strategic stakes in them. So again, its reach, its spread, its influence is amazing, and very far-reaching. These companies do have these big cash war chests, and we can expect them to become more and more dominant as time moves on. Another example of this sort of growth and dominance is Amazon. Amazon, of course, used to be a bookseller online. It's migrated now to a hardware provider as well with its Kindle, and its new Kindle Fire is a direct assault on the Apple iPad. In fact, between 2008 and 2010, Amazon almost doubled in revenues when it hit $34 billion in annual revenue, and analysts are expecting it to reach $100 billion in annual revenues by 2015. That would be faster than any other company's growth. And as some of you may know, Amazon also provides a genuine leading cloud-based data service and technology platform. So even today, Marks & Spencer's entire online retail operation is driven by an Amazon technology platform. Many of you may know about the Amazon Merchant Services, which enable merchants big and small to sell product via Amazon. And many of the big corporates today are using Amazon Cloud Services for data center management, data center outsourcing in a secure private or public cloud. So this again is an extraordinary organic development that Amazon have made, but just shows how they also are moving to dominate the global landscape in the technology arena. Fascinating stuff, of course, and in many ways these companies also are at war with each other in I'm sure the nicest possible way. Years ago it was all very simple. Everyone knew what each organization did, but nowadays Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, they don't recognize any borders. They don't feel any qualms about marching beyond the walls of technology into retailing, advertising, publishing, even into finance. And the major players here, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg and others, are all busy innovating and driving these changes in development for their organization. So a fascinating time here, and really one to observe. And I think if you have any spare cash, then if you want to invest in the stock market, then these are the kind of stocks to pick. I always remember years ago when I wrote my first eShop book, picking some of the winning technology stocks in those days, and people coming up to me saying, "Thank you very much, Michael. I made a good return on investment." And my wife always turning around to me and saying, "Why didn't we make that same profit gain?" So next time around, put my money where my mouth is and make these investments, because I think they'll be very timely. So that's one area of change and development, which is really, something to watch and observe and can be quite exciting. The next area I want to talk about is what I would call the retail time bomb, the multi-channel world, as it's often called. There's an extraordinary amount of development here as retailers and those providing consumer services especially, but also those in the B2B space, look at what's going on in terms of their consumer and customer needs and realize gradually, and perhaps somewhat belatedly in some instances, that the customers and consumers want to be able to access and buy a product anytime, anywhere, anyhow. They want the convenience, they want the value, they want the innovation, they want the ease of purchase, and they want to be able to do it when they want it and how they want it in their own time and at their own leisure. So with that going on, consumer companies and B2C organizations have been especially innovative in the internet environment. And I'm sure we've all got examples, I'm sure you can think of many in your own countries, of companies, pure play online e-commerce propositions which have seized online market share. We've just been speaking about Amazon. In this country, in the UK, there's another organization called Play.com, which is the #2 retailer of books, music and film and movies in the whole country. They're about 500 million of turnover, and they've grown from nothing in the last 10-12 years to now be second only to Amazon in the UK, and they have displaced traditional retailers from the high street, so the likes of HMV, Dixon's, even now we've been reading about game shops who've been providers of games on a retail store, all being overtaken by these online players. And of course now with mobile, this is also beginning to be the next generation, the next wave of being able to access and investigate products and purchase. And from the supply side point of view, the challenge for everybody is, how do I become truly multi-channel? How do I meet this growing customer need? If I'm a retailer, how do I operate not just an online e-commerce operation, but how do I integrate that with my stores so that if a consumer touches me in a store or online, that connection, that customer interest is captured, and I'm in a position wherever that touch point was to follow that up and close the sale. And that is a real challenge for organizations, and very few are able to do that. And again, we can talk about best practice examples in a moment, and some of you may have some examples that you want to type in or add. It's worth just standing back and reminding ourselves just how strong all this online e-commerce activity truly is. It's now some 12% of all retail sales in the UK, predicted to hit 15% by 2015. And as we'll see on the rest of this slide, this is far from being just a UK phenomenon. However, the
Michael,
UK...
I'm just going to come in here and ask a question.
Yeah.
We've got some questions coming through, and I would like to present two to you, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
please.
Samarendu has said, we're seeing the emergence of the borderless cloud conglomerate. Are they the new masters of the universe?
Ah, that's a good one. Yes, yes.
Great question to start off the session. Perhaps a
Well,
very difficult one.
I think that's a very good question. I mean, I give you an example. I do consultancy work with a corporation called Pearson. So you may know Pearson. They are a FTSE 100 corporation, headquartered in London, but with operations all over the world, employing some 50,000 people. And they are the owners of the the Financial Times newspaper group. They also own Penguin and Dorling Kindersley book publishing, and a big global business of theirs is Pearson Education, which is providing books, materials, resources to students, colleges and teachers and all over the world. They are putting a huge amount of activity and investment behind their whole technology, and they are looking to move away completely from their old IBM mainframe legacy systems into the cloud. So for them, when they have a next technology challenge, their question is, what would the solution look like if we were in the cloud? What would the solution look like if we were web-based? What would the solution look like if we used mobile technology tools? So they are very much trying to do this, and why? The reason is because cloud-based solutions potentially offer things which are quicker to market, much more cost-effective, help manage the risk, and really provide a much more competitively advantaged solution. There are risks around data protection and data security, which need to be very, very carefully managed. But nevertheless, I think companies like Pearson are in the vanguard of organizations who are looking to become cloud-centric. And of course, that is borderless, and it enables them to operate genuinely in a global way, reaching out to their customers all over the world in a consistent and coherent integrated platform. And it's not just organizations like this, but most importantly, it is the providers of cloud-based services to them. So there is another one of these technology wars taking place at the moment between two big CRM companies. One is called Siebel, and the other is called Salesforce.com. Siebel, CRM is customer relationship management tools, and Siebel has been the major provider to major multinational corporates for the past 10 years or so, if not longer. But they are rapidly losing ground to Salesforce.com. Why? Because Salesforce.com offer a cloud-based solution, a pay-as-you-go service, an infrastructure as-you-go service, which is easy to access, easy to adopt and deploy. And lots of companies like Pearson are saying, well, actually, if we're to move forward in the most cost-competitive way, why don't we tie up with Salesforce.com rather than get stuck with the old legacy solutions? So thank you. That's a great question, and it is a great example of how this technology revolution is happening around us all the time, every day, and how old businesses are losing out, and how new businesses who are more agile, more innovative, who are able to take advantage of the new technologies are genuinely gaining traction and advantage. And that's what's happening in this multi-channel world. The old legacy retailers, like in music, like HMV, like Game, like others, are losing out to the more innovative fleet-of-foot online players.
Great point to bring in the next question, actually, Michael.
Yeah.
Excuse me interrupting here, but Giles sent in a question which leads on from that, is what has Play.com done right that hmvcompany.co.uk did wrong?
Well, that's a very good question. I suppose a number of things, really. Play was a startup, so it had a clean sheet of paper, so it could, in effect, choose and select the most technologically advanced and cost-effective solution providers to help it set up. It didn't have any legacy systems it had to migrate with. It had no retail cost infrastructure. So it had none of those fixed costs with all the operational headaches and manpower resource required to run stores, run them efficiently and running them effectively. It was able to avoid warehousing and inventory, especially in its early days, because it could partner direct with the music publishers, the film publishers, and work with them for them to fulfill direct to the end user. So it had a number of cost advantages which the bigger legacy companies like HMV still had to struggle with. And then I think lastly, I think to say because it was new, it was innovative, it was different, it was of its time, and it was able to capture consumer imagination.
Fantastic. We'll go back to the presentation now, Michael, but if any of our audience out there would like to ask questions, Michael is very happy for us to jump in and ask questions that are timely and relevant. So, Michael, back over to you in the presentation.
Sure. So we're on a presentation slide here, which I hope you've got on your screens, which looks at just how far, an example, really, of just how much this technology revolution is gaining hold. I'm using the UK as an example, but actually the UK is a good example. It is in fact, unusually and unexpectedly enough, the leading e-commerce player in the world. And a lot of people struggle to understand that, but spending per head online in the UK is higher than anywhere else in the world. And as a percentage contribution to GDP in the UK, that is higher than anywhere else in the world. So in terms of talent pools and innovation, and maybe reasons why companies like Play.com have been successful, is because there's a lot happening here, and a lot of countries are looking to the UK for learning, for best practices, for benchmarks, and also, frankly, for talent. So those people looking to build and make careers in this particular space can quickly become very, very valuable and in great demand. So, you know, out of total retail sales in the UK alone, there was some 80 billion euros just last year. Despite economic slowdown, global e-sales are up, and approximately some 700 billion euros in 2011. France and Germany are experiencing very high growth rates. In the UK, that per capita spend that I've just referred to is 1350 euros per head per annum. And that's quite a lot of spend, actually, if you think about it. This digital economy is providing employment for some 750,000 people. And worth just reflecting on that for a moment. Google have announced, following encouragement from the UK government, that they will open up a new digital technology centre in the east part of London, which it's hoped will become a hub for talent and technology innovation and an incubator for new technology ideas and new investments. And it's expected that some 3,000 or 4,000 people may well become employed there as time moves on. And it's just that kind of investment and innovation which both captures imagination, but which really becomes a sort of virtuous circle, really. The more that's invested, the more the talent pool grows, the more innovation that results, the more business ventures that get spawned and incubated, the more online activity happens, the more e-commerce grows, and the more contribution it grows to GDP. I am surprised myself that the UK government doesn't more overtly and explicitly talk about this, and I'm surprised that they don't more actively sponsor and support investment in these areas. It's still a relatively quietly spoken about, but it is very, very powerful. It does contribute substantially to the wealth of the country, And a major study by the Boston Consulting Group, in partnership actually with Google, just last year, showed that within reasonable traction, and we'll look at this again later on, that the online digital technology contribution could well reach 15% of GDP by 2018. And that would make it worth significantly more at that point than the whole of UK financial services. So as time marches on, there is a substantial opportunity here for a country like the UK to really establish a global leadership in technology innovation. And just to give you another dimension to all that, more than 1 billion parcels, again in the UK alone, were shipped from online purchases. And just the other day I was in a roundtable discussion at the BBC here in London because a number of new business ventures have been set up enabling consumers in the UK who want to buy, for example, product from US-based e-commerce companies but don't have an address or aren't registered in the US. There are now intermediary distributors who will say, don't worry, register with us, we'll set up a US business address for you, and we'll arrange for collection of the product from the US supplier and ship it to you in the UK. And there already are some 20 or so companies who've rushed in to offer that service, everything from myus.com to reship.com, who even offer a gift wrapping service. So again, there's an example of there are no boundaries, there are no borders. As soon as any kind of challenge or hurdle is identified, the internet enables a solution provider to step in and actually really provide a quick and easy solution. So again, fascinating as to how these things can migrate and develop. Coming back specifically to the retail time bomb, which I spoke about a little earlier, and how e-commerce is just redefining this whole retail landscape. And look, this is happening here in the UK, but it's happening everywhere in the world. And some retailers, but still only a handful of leading players, are recognizing how there is a substantial shift and switch from the traditional retail bricks and mortar world to the online world, that there is a declining and reducing need to have all these shops and stores, and that the new multi-channel landscape needs a different mix of online and retail portfolio. So here's some examples of a few who have figured this out, but still yet to make the significant transformation and change. So Wix is a leading UK DIY retailer, and they have announced a few months ago that they plan to shrink their store base as web transforms retail. So that was a headline in a trade magazine called Retail Week, which talked about Wix will shed about 30% of its retail stores. The full future for us will be a portfolio of selected stores combined with a strong multi-channel presence. In another Retail Week editorial, in the next 5 to 10 years, the retail landscape will be transformed as retailers need to reconfigure their asset base to reflect this multi-channel environment. From the CEO of a company called Aurora Fashions, who are the owners of the women's apparel chains Oasis and Warehouse. Again, a recent quote from their chief executive: we used to look at some 200 stores to give us nationwide UK coverage. Now, with online developments and growth, we're looking at probably no more than 30. And as I mentioned, this is far from being just a UK phenomenon. Sears in the US has announced a store closure program. Sears chief executive Lou D'Ambrosio said that given the rise of e-commerce, the threat from the pure play online retailers, and the generally slower economic environment, there is a need to reconfigure the asset base and accelerate the transformation of the Sears business model into an integrated store and online format. And just the other day, the chairman of John Lewis in a seminar, worried that the announcements by the likes of Tesco and Sainsbury's, who for the moment at least plan to continue to open substantial numbers of stores, he felt that it was impossible to justify that additional investment. In a private seminar just the other day, in a Google-held round table, one of the Google industry chiefs commented how, in terms of the latest stats, some 13 shops in the UK alone are closing each day. 13 shops each day. And yes, of course, some of that is attributable to continued challenges in the economic environment. But as this Google chap pointed out, a lot of it's now due to the rise of e-commerce. So this is substantial, and what it means is that shopping landscape, that retail environment, all those assets, and worryingly all that employment is now under threat. There has been a recent study by a high-profile UK TV commentator called Mary Portas, who was asked by the government to look at this retail high street decline. And she attributed the decline, which no one would dispute, to a mix of the out-of-town stores, the big destination shopping malls, and the slower economic environment. And she herself, in her analysis, actually at the time didn't attribute that much to the online world, which shows some of the myopia and narrow-minded thinking amongst traditional retailers. But the facts are, in secondary high streets, sales are down 10% versus a year ago. Retail shop vacancy rates are at all-time high. And in many retail high streets today, the only things you can see are cheap shops like a Poundland, which sells everything for £1, an estate agent and a betting shop. And the traditional variety and mix of stores that attracted footfall and people to walk up and down and socialize and meet on the street have gone. Portas calls for government intervention and investment to save our high street, and felt that, for example, freer car parking and lower business rates might help. But my own judgment and that of PricewaterhouseCoopers, who have also reacted to the Mary Portas review, is that this would make little or no difference, because the changes are much more fundamental and much more far-reaching. So to succeed, high street retailers really need, and they can survive, but they need to achieve that destination effect, a reason for people to want to get in their car or walk down the road and actually visit a physical shop. And I think what's happened over the last 10 years especially is that all the innovation in retailing has gone online, and largely speaking, and obviously there are a few exceptions, but largely speaking, that value, that convenience and that innovation is now missing from a high street store. The internet's winning because it's scoring higher on those key elements, but I think bricks and mortar retailers can fight back, and there are some examples as listed there. Again, these are from the UK, but I'm sure maybe in your own countries you might see some examples that you'd care to share with us. But an electricals retailer called Richer Sounds has made their stores an absolute destination experience for people who want advice and guidance and input and information. Dixon's Black is another organization in a similar space who've tried to succeed by offering advances in customer service. Daunt Books is an example of a bookshop chain which has resisted the encroachment of Amazon and is really succeeding very efficiently in developing a local community support and flavor to its stores, which encourage people to go. And look, there are other examples here as well. But I think the message is that unless retailers do fight back, then many of the existing retail environments will cease to exist. And those of you as MBA students and graduates might, I hope, appreciate this next PowerPoint slide, because it looks at the impact on store profitability of a 15% consumer switch from buying online to buying online instead of buying in the store. And why is this switch to e-commerce and online, why is it producing a retail time bomb? Why is it having such a fundamental effect on the retail landscape? Well, this looks at the sort of an abbreviated P&L, an abbreviated profit and loss account, from revenues, from store sales, down to net operating margin, and looks at two columns, a current position and what would the case be if there was a 15% switch from the bricks and mortar world to the online world. So if we just look at the current column today, and we take store sales at 100, typical percentage cost of goods, net cost of goods at 75%, leaving a gross margin of 25. Fixed operating costs for the retail store base, typically around 20, leaving a net operating margin of 5%. And as you'll know, in the retail environment today, that's a pretty healthy retail operating margin. However, if there's a 15% switch, then we're looking at store sales at 85, assuming a cost of goods, which I think would be a little bit higher here. We reach a net cost of goods of 65. Percentage cost of goods would be higher here because with lower revenues, lower store volumes, the amount of supplier discounts and rebates would be reduced, and so the percentage cost of goods would be a touch higher. So that would leave a net cost of goods of 65, leaving a gross margin of just 20, with fixed costs remaining the same. The net operating margin is 0. Now, you cannot survive, obviously, on a net operating margin of 0. And as we all know, that 15% switch from bricks and mortar to online is already happening. In some sectors like film, books, electricals, computers, travel, that switch has already been made, and the percentage penetration is 30, 40, 50%. In clothing, the percentage is creeping up very aggressively, and we're seeing it in many, many other categories. The average today in the UK is 11, 12%, forecast to be 15% in 3 years' time. So across the board, by 2015, retail will be, online will be at least 15% of all retail sales. So every store in the high street that doesn't fight back, that doesn't find that response in innovation, ease of convenience and way of doing things, is going to struggle, and you cannot survive. So the financial pressures are really going to mount on retail organizations. So
Michael,
that is.
I have a question here from Tony Bird. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
His question is, ultimately the online trend can and will promote all aspects of social behavior. Do you really think that this is good overall, especially due to the amount of job losses in the future? And if it is good, then where do all the new jobs come from for the next generation?
Well, it's a very good question about job losses. It certainly worries me about the job losses on the retail estate and the youth unemployment situation. But the upside is, and as I referred to earlier, if there is more investment from the likes of Google, if the government gets behind technology investment in this country, then we could see a switch from perhaps more traditional employment skills into skills which have a more of a technology flavor and support. And that might well take up the employment slack and may even create incremental new jobs on top of that. And of course it's a very big question, which I don't know if we've really got time to get into today, about online being a force for good or actually a force for disruption. And you know, as much as it's contributed to the social spring uprisings in the Arab world, you know, there are some you know, other things, other aspects of it which perhaps are more worrying. And there was a very good book written a few years ago called Technology Bites Back. And it's always true that for every advance in technology, there are other things which, steps which and things happen which are more worrying. So far be it for me to try and claim this is a perfect world, or that technology is going to be the answer to everything. But I think it is a phenomenon that is happening, and in the business world, people need to deal with it. So that's really my message. And I don't
Great
think
answer,
that's happening.
Michael. Thank you. A comment I remember from 10 years ago as my son was going on to university from the careers teacher was that as graduates come out into the world of work, they're going to have on average not 7 different jobs in their working lives, but 7 different careers, and 5 of them have not yet been invented. Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of skilling and looking to the future, it's a complex world and it's an entrepreneurial world. We've all got to be equipped, but there are replacements coming into the world of work constantly, and it's about recognizing and skilling. There's another very interesting question here from Samarendu again. High street retailers are also being hit by the rising sharing economy. What could they do?
But Sharon, could you explain, by the rising sharing economy, did you say?
Sharing economy, yes. Samarendu has sent this in. Maybe, Samarendu, you could actually explain a little bit more about what you mean by the sharing economy, and we'll come back to that after the next slide. So, Michael, if you'd like to continue on, and then we'll get a little bit more clarification on that from
okay.
Samarendu.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That would be helpful. Yes, just the last slide, really, about this multi-channel challenge. Here's just a summary, I think, of some of the key questions that businesses and organizations need to be asking. And, there's a lot more detail in the eShop 2020 book, which looks at sort of questionnaires and checklists and tests and things like that. But companies need to look at this multi-channel environment and decide, well, which channels are going to deliver the best return on investment. And actually, even if one channel may not return an attractive level of investment, nevertheless, do we need to be in it because as a complement to everything else that we do? Which campaigns work best? If we communicate via channel A, then is there a must-have complementary channel that we must also be involved in? What's the ideal? Can we afford, for example, to ignore social media or mobile? A lot of people are saying, well, we'll get up a Facebook page, but maybe doing more than that is beyond us at the moment. Or, oh yes, mobile, yes, we can see the innovation development, but that's something for 2013 or 2014. But again, lots happening in that space, huge amount of innovation, a huge amount of customer and consumer preference to interact and operate in that way. In Japan, mobile is such a dominant force in the way people communicate and interact and purchase. So lots going on and difficult really to ignore that. And there are obviously other questions on this list. But I think I will leave this multi-channel point here because I think we've all got a sense now of the scope and scale of the challenge. So I wanted to look at how our whole computing world is changing, and some of this reflects the conversation we had at the beginning about the sort of borderless cloud and the changes in innovation take place. One very interesting place to start, I think, is around the a great film that was put together by Steven Spielberg with Tom Cruise. Oh, more than 10 years ago now. Many of you may have seen it, called Minority Report. And although it's just a great movie in its own right, it was very much a movie that showcased future technology trends. And in fact, Spielberg records that he got together in Palo Alto in a 3-day summit before the film even sort of was made. A number of the world's leading technology gurus and futurists to really talk about, well, what is going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years? What innovation and changes do we expect to see? What things are in the technology lab today which actually in the future we would expect to see matured and developed. And the extraordinary thing about Minority Report is that over time, so much of what it showcased has actually come to life. And here was something that was literally just done very much as a, as a science fiction movie, and now has become reality. So there was, for example, the multi-touch interface. There was the command and connect environment, and those of you who see the film may recall how Tom Cruise literally orchestrated internet connectivity, accessed 3D holographic displays of data and information, where we'd moved to a screenless world. In other words, there was no longer a barrier of a screen between me and the data I wanted to connect with. And I could talk to that data and it would respond to me. And it was very interactive, very live, and very engaging. There was a whole thing also about putting the internet data onto a retina contact lens with LED display. And again, some of you may have seen the film Terminator 3 with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and recall how there's a scene where he walks into a cafe, needs to acquire some clothing, and is able to see a whole computer display through his eye, through the contact lens in his eye. And this is now becoming reality. The commercial technology exists. Prototypes have been developed in the lab, and a lot of people are saying that by 2020 we will be able to purchase and acquire contact lenses which will insert in the eye and give us access to 3D holographic data. We will access the internet at our choosing when we want to. We won't have to click and collect or point and click. We will simply ask the question and state, connect me to the net, and we will be instantly connected. So we are moving to this wonderful world, and you can see on the slide here, I can see it evolving. So if the last era has been about point and click, I guess we're in a sort of touch and go environment at the moment. And that's been fueled, of course, by Apple. And if you watch kids today, if they approach a computer screen, their instinct is to touch and move. They don't understand why your average desktop computer or your average laptop won't do that. They want to touch and move something, and they can't do that unless it's an Apple device at the moment. But all that will change, and many, if not most, of the PC manufacturers today are developing solutions which enable that. Equally around touch and talk, which is all about, again, rather than having to be able to use a cursor through voice recognition software, I can simply speak to the computer, touch and move data, and it will respond to me. I think we'll move through our command and connect sequence into this think, talk, move environment. So there are innovations such as Jest Cube, which enable you to literally wave your hand at a device and move things around. There are things which you can wear over your brain, which are like scalp detectors, which can identify the way you think. And companies, even like Microsoft, using Xbox Kinect and Guest Cube technology, are developing BCI, brain-computer interaction, enabling us just to interact and use information in such an easy way. And this is our future. Our future won't be staring at a screen. Our future will be accessing data on the move where we want to see it and how we want to see it. And I like this picture here, which I hope has come up with reasonably clear resolution on your screen, because here's a couple of ladies who are out shopping. They see somebody wearing a coat, they like it, they can summon up a 3D holographic display by simply asking the computer, can you find a mirror or matching image of that coach, please? Yes, here it is. Where can I buy it? How much does it cost? Where's the nearest shop? What do other people say about it from a social media, social referencing, peer-to-peer perspective? How near is that Bloomingdale shop? Do I want to buy it online or do I want to walk into the shop? I could click and reserve, walk into the shop and pick it up there and then. And that's a brilliant example of all this technology coming to life in this consumer world. But just imagine all the other business applications and business opportunities around this. Just completely extraordinary and very, very exciting. The last thing to talk about really is the growth of online and how, coming back to the earlier part of the conversation about the contribution it's making to GDP and how that contribution is growing and developing. This simply shows in a bar chart, again taking the UK as an example, the average, the growing number, I should say, of online buyers and the percentage penetration of the youth and adult population who are doing that buying. And this is a wonderful chart, I find, and the last one I'm going to go through today, which is straight from, and you have permission to use it, from Boston Consulting Group, from their study, which looked at how internet and online e-commerce and transaction capability is contributing to economic development. So they've taken as their baseline 2009, and they've looked at what factors contribute. And this is true, of course, all over the world. And, for example, the levels of broadband penetration vary enormously from country to country. There's still a whole disenfranchised community where, or in various countries in the world, where internet and broadband penetration is very low. But here there's a forecast in the UK that will rise to some 84%. That's a key trigger. And again, broadband penetration is already at those sorts of levels in Northern Europe, at much lower levels in Southern Europe, at advanced levels in some countries in the Asia-Pac region, and way behind in others. So it does vary, and everyone's in catch-up mode. But that broadband penetration is the trigger, because it enables the easy download of information, the easy access of information, the fast convenience. It enables innovation, and it enables that 3D technology to really reach out to people. Another factor is investment from government, which there's an assumption at about a 2% spending growth, and a possibility of further spending growth. But all of that only takes us up to a certain point. We need more penetration of broadband, we need greater reliability, we need greater government support and investment, but all of those things can really drive that future world, that future scenario. It will happen anyway over time. British Telecom, BT in the UK do have a fast broadband rollout program. Unfortunately, like many of these big corporate programs, it's taking its time to reach out into rural areas. But mobile is leaping over that and potentially providing some faster paced solutions. So an enormous amount going on. And I suppose really I've been asked to leave a few minutes at the end here for any sort of questions that you may have, which I'd be delighted to try and address. But I think I would just summarize by saying we've just scratched the surface here in the course of the last 55 minutes in terms of what's taking place in terms of the digital technology revolution. And as I say, I think we are privileged to be going through a period of fundamental change, of innovation and excitement, which is frankly leaves me speechless from time to time. So on that note, I'll stop and ask our chairperson, Sharon Banff, if there are any more questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michael. Most informative. I'm going to go back to the question asked earlier by Samarendu about the sharing economy, and he very kindly came back and gave us a definition of that, which is about sharing toys, clothes, garden tools, sleeping on sofas when traveling, sharing meals, open source software, drop-in labs, etc. Also, the fact that collaborative consumption, as it's also known, what's mine is yours, is actually being invested in by hard-nosed VCs, $110 billion of investment money going into this economy. So really, we want to look at the impact of this on high street retailers. I don't know if you've got any comment. And Samarandu, thank you so much for coming back to us on that.
Well, thanks, and that's obviously a huge question. Goodness me! I mean, the answer is yes. Of course, it's having an enormous impact. Here's an example. So, 2 or 3 years back, I was involved in helping to launch a business called myfaveshop.com, which was sponsored by Lord Saatchi, and this business was all about online social sharing, social media, social shopping was the phrase that was used. So what did it enable you to do? It enabled people to browse the global web together. So you can now download co-browsing tools so that you and I could go shopping together tonight, for example. And we could say, let's go online at 6 o'clock this evening, follow my screen. There's a few things I want to show you. I'm looking at buying, let's say, a new car. I want to show you some snapshots of some of the vehicles, some of the autos I'm looking at, and I welcome your advice and your experience. And then if we like what we see, we can put these items into a shopping environment. We can invite others to contribute their comments, their experiences, whether they think this is a good or a bad investment to make. And if I like what I'm seeing, and I'm hearing lots of good social and peer-to-peer recommendations, then you know, I can shop and buy. And you could do that with cars, you could do that with clothing. So we could say, I want to buy a new coat for my mother, and I could get my family, my sister might be in Australia, and we could go shopping together. And we could share our views and opinions, we could collate views from other people, other families and friends or people that we like. We could go onto Facebook and let people know that we're doing this if we wanted to involve a wider audience or a wider community. So there's no end to this agree to check and share and learn from each other. And that can happen in a social shopping environment. The whole open source world that your questioner has also referred to is such a huge development and change. And one of the reasons why, of course, Apple has been so successful is because it's opened up its technology platform to this global village of technology developers. That's why there are some near 750,000 different apps out there for both iPhone and iPad, and why Apple has become so successful, because it charges for each app, both to put it on its platform, and also it charges a commission on every sale that results. So huge opportunities again, and definitely the way of the future is this whole social sharing environment.
Thank you very much. I have something here from Gaudisho. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. He wants to go back to the multi-channel and for you to perhaps elaborate a little bit more about the banking sector and banking online, and how is that going to be managed?
Well, I think banks have always been, I think, quite slow to adopt things online. And of course, the main questions and challenges they have are twofold. One is they are highly regulated, and so everything they do has to be so carefully scrutinized and go through various hurdles of approval. And the second thing is, of course, that they are custodians of huge amounts of private and very personal data and information. And so anything which might prejudice or put that in jeopardy has to be very carefully thought through. So, for example, putting data in the cloud for them is at the moment an absolute no-no, because if there was any breach, if there was any breach of firewalls or any breakthroughs, the negative publicity would be tremendous. But there are private clouds, there are ways of doing things, is continuing innovation in that arena. So I think we should expect to see banks doing, and financial services organizations doing more and more in the online e-commerce world. And therefore we should expect to see much more of this multi-channel type environment. At another level, of course, people who do shop online, from a consumer perspective, they don't want to be typing in their credit card every time. They want to use, the equivalent of the online wallet, whether it's PayPal or some other provider, so that it's just a click and go type situation. And many banks are looking at providing that type of solution, both online and through mobile devices. So again, an area of innovation. Again, I don't think we would expect to see banks and financial services in the forefront of all this, but they're going to be forced to progress and catch up because consumers and customers are going to demand it.
Thank you very much, Michael. We're just hitting 2 o'clock, but Simon sent in an interesting question. I wonder if you could do a 30-second answer, just as a final question here. His company provides design and publishing services to clients and are using online collaboration tools and screen sharing more and more. Can you give any insights on how this might evolve in the future?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think, as you said, as the question was asked, these tools do exist. I think right now, I would say, as a short answer, not everyone has access to these tools, not everyone has downloaded the software, not everybody is comfortable necessarily with using them. But I think as our technology environment grows, as user friendliness and ease of use increases, I would say expect to see this more and more commonplace.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you so much. To all of you, if you would like to have copies of the slides, Michael has very graciously said we can send them out to you, so let us know and we'll email them on to you. In the meantime, to find out more about the insights for the future of how technology will be changing all our lives in the way we operate, the way we shop and the way we live, I'd suggest going to eShop 2020, Michael's latest book. Michael, thank you so much, not just for today, but your consistent support of all we're trying to achieve at the Association of MBAs in supporting the continuous professional development of our students and our members that have graduated. For all of you out there, we'd like to mention our next webinar, which is about women in business navigating career success, which will take place on the 11th of April at 1300 hours GMT. This webinar is designed not only for women focusing on their own careers, but for anyone working for an organization that looks to provide a better structure and support to encourage women to reach the highest levels. Our speakers, Vicky Holton and Fiona Dent, are experts on gender diversity in organizations, and they'll be offering their advice for female managers and anecdotes and tips gained from successful women in the course of their research. They'll also explore how organizations can ensure women reach the top, drawing on their recently published book, Women in Business. So for all of you women out there, as well as the males in our organizations and our wider community, a must attend webinar. We look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, please email us with any of your comments. And thank you again, Michael, and a great, great presentation, a superb read, and once more, thank you for your support. Good afternoon to you all, wherever you are in the world, and we look forward to speaking to you at our next webinar. Bye-bye.